Static. I work in data analysis. I say that because it's relevant. Because the way I'm wired, the way I process the world, is through patterns, numbers, sequences that either make sense or don't. I'm not someone who believes in coincidence for its own sake, and I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions. If something looks like a pattern, I want to verify it before I call it a pattern. It took me 8 months to see it. I've been volunteering with our county search and rescue unit for going on 3 years now. I got into it after my brother got turned around on a trail in the Cascades and spent 2 nights out on his own, before a team found him. He was fine, hypothermic and embarrassed, but fine. I started training the following spring. I wanted to be useful in the way those volunteers had been useful to us. What I'm going to describe covers 4 separate searches over about 14 months. I wasn't comparing different searches to each other at the time. Why would I? Our equipment periodically malfunctions, gear gets wet, batteries drain faster in the cold, and radios lose signals in the drainages. These things happen constantly, and you learn to work around them and move on. It was only afterward, sitting with my incident logs late one night, that I noticed it. I keep very detailed personal logs. It's a habit from my other job. I'll go through them in order. The first search was October, 2 years ago. A trail runner, male, 41, had gone out for a Saturday morning run on a ridge loop and hadn't come home by dark. Standard call out. 6 of us went in. About 4 hours into the search, my GPS froze, just locked up completely. Screen static, unresponsive, had to pull the batteries out and restart it. Took maybe 4 minutes to come back online. I logged it as a device issue, swapped to a paper map and compass, and moved on. When the GPS came back, I noted my position and kept going. We found the trail runner 2 hours later. He'd gone off the edge of a switchback in the dark on his way back down, a 30-foot fall into a rocky drainage. Unfortunately, he hadn't survived. The location where I found him was less than 200 yards from where my GPS had locked up. I didn't think about that at the time. Why would I? Second search, February. A cross-country skier reported overdue by his wife after a solo day trip. Heavy snowpack that week. Visibility had been poor. We were maybe 5 hours in, working a grid in deteriorating light, when 3 of our radios cut out simultaneously. Not gradual static, clean silence, like someone had pulled a plug. We had 6 team members split into pairs, and the middle pair, myself and a volunteer named Greg, lost contact with both the lead pair and the rear pair at the same exact moment. We stopped moving, ran through the standard checks, tried switching channels. Nothing for about 6 minutes. Then they came back, both pairs, mid-sentence, like nothing had happened. We marked the location, noted it in our logs as a possible interference zone, and continued on. We found the skier the following morning, when the light was better. He had fallen through a snow bridge stretching over the creek and had been partially submerged. Exposure had taken him within a few hours of the fall. The location of the radio blackout was, by my later calculation, approximately a quarter mile from where we found him. I wrote down as follows: equipment anomaly, possible terrain interference, in my log, and didn't look at it again for months. Third search, June. A backpacker, female 26, was 3 days overdue on a solo trip in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Large search area, difficult terrain, multiple teams working different sectors. My team's incident this time was a headlamp, my headlamp. A unit I'd owned for 2 years with fresh batteries began flickering about 6 hours into the night search. Not dying, not going out, just flickering in an irregular pattern. Switched to my backup light without thinking much of it, clipped the malfunctioning one to my back, and kept moving. The backup worked fine for the rest of the night. Out of curiosity, later at camp, I tried the primary headlamp again. It worked perfectly. I checked the batteries, full charge. I've used it on 4 searches since, with no issue. We didn't find the backpacker on that search. She was discovered 3 weeks later by a different team, in a sector we hadn't covered. I was not present for the recovery, but I was given the coordinates she was found at, and I know where I was standing when my headlamp started flickering. 4th search, September, the one that made me pull out all of my old logs. Missing person, male, 58, experienced, had gone in for a solo elk hunt and missed his check-in window by 36 hours. My team covered the eastern sector we were assigned. 7 hours in, near the end of our sweep before we were due to rotate out, my radio started producing feedback. Not loud, subtle, like a half-caught frequency, almost like the edge of a voice that never quite resolved into words. I adjusted the squelch and tried a different channel. The sound faded. I reported it to our coordinator as a possible cross-channel bleed, finished the rotation, and hiked out. We didn't find him that day. A team found him 4 days later. Cardiac event. He'd been sitting against a tree, pack still on, like he just decided to rest. Peaceful, as far as those things go. The medical examiner estimated he'd been gone within the first 24 hours, likely before the search even started. That night, after I heard where they'd found him, I sat with the coordinates in my head for a long time. Something about it felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. I went to my log. I pulled up the GPS locations from my rotation that day. I had passed within 90 feet of him. 90 feet, in dense timber, at the exact time my radio was producing that sound. I went back through all of it after that. All 4 logs. I pulled up coordinates, calculated distances, and sat with the numbers for a long time. Which is an understatement. I don't know what to do with what I found. 4 searches and 4 equipment anomalies. A GPS freeze, a radio blackout, a flickering headlamp, and audio feedback. 4 recovered victims. These are the distances between the malfunction location and the recovery location of each victim. 180 yards, 400 yards. I don't have the exact coordinates for the 3rd one, but bear with me. And finally, for the last victim, 90 feet. I've tried every explanation in the book. Terrain interference, battery chemistry in the cold weather, user error, coincidence. Coincidence most of all, because that's the one I need to be true. 3 data points can be a coincidence. I know that. I work with data all the time. I know how pattern recognition misfires in human brains, how we find signal and noise because we are built to. But I keep coming back to that radio. That sound was almost a voice, almost resolving into something, and then it didn't. I keep thinking about the fact that I was 90 feet away from a man who had been sitting against a tree, alone, and in the dark for 3 days. And something in the equipment I was carrying made a sound I had never heard it make before or since. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything, really. I'm saying the numbers don't reconcile, and I don't have a column to put it in, and that bothers me more than I know how to explain. I go back out next weekend. New search, different range. I put fresh batteries in everything. I don't know why that felt important, but it does. The Man from the Ridge. I want to say up front that I've told this story maybe 4 times total. To my team lead, my girlfriend, my dad, and now whoever is reading this. My team lead told me there's probably a rational explanation. My girlfriend told me to stop volunteering. My dad didn't say anything for a long time and then changed the subject. So, make of that what you will. This was my second full season. September, Southern Rockies, elevation around 9,000 feet. We had a missing subject, a woman, 44, solo backpacker, and was 3 days overdue on a 7-day loop, experienced by all accounts. Her husband said she'd done longer trips alone and always checked in at the trailheads. She hadn't checked in. Her car was still in the lot. 6 of us went in. Night search, which I still don't love even now. There's something about moving through high country timber in the dark with headlamps that makes everything past the beam feel closer than it is. You get used to it, but you don't ever get comfortable with it. Or at least I don't. We were maybe 5 hours in, working a ridge system about 4 miles from the trailhead, when we came across him. And I want to be precise here, because it's the part people always push back on. He didn't appear out of nowhere. He didn't materialize. There was no dramatic moment. We came around a switchback, and he was just there, moving uphill at a steady pace about 30 yards ahead of us. He had trekking pole, large frame backpack, gaiters, and a headlamp with a red night vision filter. The kind of setup that tells you immediately this person knows what they're doing. Nothing alarming about any of it, except we were 4 miles from the trailhead at 2 in the morning on a trail that wasn't on most maps. Our team lead, a guy named Walt, called out to him. The man stopped and turned around and waited for us to close the distance, which is what you do when someone calls to you in the backcountry at night. You don't spook, you don't run, you wait. Completely normal response. Walt asked if he was all right, whether he needed anything. The man said he was fine, just pushing through to a campsite further along the ridge. Said he preferred night hiking this time of year to avoid the afternoon weather, which is a real thing people do. High country afternoon thunderstorms are no joke. The explanation was completely reasonable. Walt mentioned we were search and rescue, that we had a missing subject in the area, described her general appearance and last known equipment. Standard thing to do when you encounter anyone during an active search. Did you see anyone? Did you hear anything? The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said yes, actually. He thought he might have. He described a woman matching our subject's description. Approximate age, pack color, or specific style of trekking poles which had been in the report, but wasn't something we had led with. Said he'd crossed paths with her maybe 2 hours earlier, further along the ridge, moving towards a drainage that cut down toward the valley floor on the east side. She'd seemed fine, he said, moving well, didn't mention anything being wrong. Walt confirmed the drainage. It was an unmaintained route, not on the standard trail system, the kind of thing you'd only know about from experienced or detailed topography study. We hadn't covered it yet. It was plausible. We got the man's name, which I won't use here, and Walt noted it in his log. The man pointed us in the right direction, and we thanked him and moved on. Here's where I need to describe the terrain, because it matters. The ridge we were on opened up a 1/4 mile past where we met him. It opened up significantly into a wide alpine meadow, maybe 300 yards across and twice that in length. It was above the tree line, no cover, short grass, the kind of place where you can see from one end to the other without obstruction. Full visibility in every direction, including behind us where we'd come from. We were maybe halfway across the meadow when Walt stopped and turned around. He said, and I remember this clearly because of how he said it, very flat, very even. He said he wanted to get that man's information confirmed before we went further into the drainage. Standard practice when you get a tip from a civilian. Verify the source before you commit your whole team to a new direction. He tried the radio first. Spotty coverage on the ridge, not unusual. Then he said he was going to backtrack to the tree line and try for better signal, and that he also wanted to see if the man was still moving along the ridge above us and could confirm the drainage entry point. Walt walked back toward the tree line. The rest of us waited in the meadow. He came back about 8 minutes later. He didn't say anything right away, just stood there at the edge of the meadow looking back the same way he'd come. Then he asked if anyone had watched which direction the man had gone after we left him. Nobody had. We'd all been focused on the terrain ahead. Walt said he'd gone back to the switchback where we'd met him, then continued in both directions along the trail for about 10 minutes each way. No sign of him. The trail above ran along an open ridgeline for at least half a mile before hitting timber, visible the whole way. Empty. The trail below ran back the way we'd come, also clear. He tried calling out. Nothing. The cave system was Walt's first thought. There was a mapped network of small caves in the limestone on the eastern side of that ridge. Not deep, not technical, but present. His thinking was the man had ducked into one of the cave entries to shelter or sleep. Maybe didn't want to engage further. Possible. Logical. The kind of explanation that holds together if you don't look at it too hard. But Walt had his GPS unit. The nearest mapped cave entry was 600 meters from where we'd met the man. In the time between us leaving him and Walt going back, maybe 20 minutes, a person moving at normal pace could have reached it. Barely. If they moved immediately and moved fast and known exactly where they were going in the dark. We marked the interaction point in the log, flagged it, and pushed on to the drainage. We found our subject the following morning. She was in the drainage, exactly where the man had said she'd be. She'd taken a bad step on wet rock crossing a creek and gone down hard. Broken ankle, mild hypothermia, but alive. She'd been there since the previous afternoon, about 4 hours before the man told us he'd seen her moving well on the ridge. I've thought about that a lot. I've thought about the trekking pole detail, which was specific and correct, and not something that had been in any public communication about the search. I've thought about the drainage, which we found her in, exactly as he described. I've thought about that meadow, 300 yards across, full visibility, 6 of us standing in it. Walt filed his report and listed the civilian contact as unverified, couldn't confirm identity. Follow-up attempts unsuccessful. The name the man had given us came back clean, meaning it came back as a real person, a real address, a real phone number. We called it. The man who had answered, never been to that part of the state, said he hadn't left his house that week. Walt said identity mix-up. Wrong number written down in the field. Happens more than you'd think. Maybe. We were tired. It was dark. And Walt's handwriting isn't great even under the best conditions. I think about that field a lot though. That wide open field with short grass and no cover, and the sky starting to go gray by the time we crossed it. I think about how there was nowhere to go. Won't go. I spent 26 years as a wildlife biologist before I retired. I tell you that because my entire career was built on observation on watching animal behavior and drawing careful evidence-based conclusions. I don't anthropomorphize. I don't project. When an animal does something unusual, I look for the biological explanation first, before I consider anything else. I've been volunteering with our regional search and rescue unit for 11 years. My background made me a natural fit for the canine team. I understand working dogs. I understand scent behavior. I understand the mechanics of how a trained search animal processes information and responds to it. What I'm going to describe, I have no biological explanation for. The land in question is a stretch of high desert terrain in the interior West. I won't be more specific than that. Not because I'm being dramatic, but because I've watched people spend considerable amounts of energy trying to identify locations in stories like this one, and I don't think that serves anyone. It's a several hundred-acre parcel of land with mixed scrub and dry wash, the kind of terrain that looks empty from a distance and reveals itself slowly when you're moving through it on foot. BLM land, technically open to the public, rarely visited. The first time I noticed anything was 4 years ago. We had a missing subject, a man, 67, who'd gone out for a morning walk from a primitive campsite and hadn't returned by dark. His wife called it in. By the time we arrived, it was well past midnight, and we were working in teams. I was working with a shepherd named Coda, 8 years old at the time, certified in both trailing and area search, close to 400 hours in the field. Reliable, focused, the kind of dog you trust completely because she has never given you a reason not to. We were moving through the dry wash country in the dark when Coda stopped. Not a slow stop, not the gradual deceleration of a dog who has lost a scent or is casting for it. A hard stop, all 4 feet planted, weight shifted back slightly, nose up rather than down. She wasn't tracking. She was reading the air in front of her. I gave her a moment, then I encouraged her forward. She turned sideways. Not away from the direction we'd been heading. Sideways, 90 degrees, facing across the wash. She held that position and then sat down, which in Coda's language means a firm, voluntary refusal. She will do this when she encounters terrain she has assessed as unsafe. Loose rock faces, unstable creek banks. The behavior is trained and deliberate. She is telling you, I am not going there. I looked at the terrain ahead. Flat scrubland, dry grass, scattered juniper. Nothing that should read as physically unsafe to a dog who has worked worse terrain in worse conditions without hesitation. I tried twice more. Both times, she sat. We skirted the area, pushed further north, and found our subject 2 hours later. He had wandered further than expected and was disoriented but physically fine. I noted Coda's refusal behavior in my log, flagged it as anomalous, and moved on. Dogs have off nights. One incident means nothing. The second time was 14 months later. Different search, different subject, different time of year. A missing teenager, male, 16, separated from a group camping trip. 3 canine teams deployed, myself with a younger dog named Priest, a 4-year-old Malinois, only his second full season, but solid and eager. We were covering a wide grid across the same general stretch of terrain when Priest hit the boundary. He was ahead of me on a long lead, nose down and working, and then he stopped exactly the way Coda had. Hard stop, weight back, and nose up. I watched him process whatever he was processing for about 30 seconds. Then he began backing up. Priest had never backed away from anything in his working life before. He is not a timid dog. He has worked active crime scenes, cadaver recoveries, and urban disaster rubble. He backed up 4 full steps and then turned and pressed himself against my left leg, which he had not done since he was a puppy. I spent 10 minutes trying to work him through it. Treats, encouragement, lead pressure, everything in my toolkit. He would not cross whatever line he had decided was there. The teenager was found that night by a different team, in a completely different sector. He was fine. He had just gotten turned around while exploring. Happens to the best of us. I talked to the other handler afterward, casually, not mentioning my incident specifically. Just asked her how her dog had worked. She said fine, mostly. Then she paused and mentioned that her dog had been strange in one area. Reluctant, she said her dog wanted to go sideways instead of forward. I asked her to show me on a map of where it had happened. It was the same stretch of land. The third time I don't talk about in detail. What I'll say is it was a different unit, a different state, a handler I don't know personally who had come to assist on a large-scale search. I was observing, not running a dog that day or anything like that. I watched her shepherd refuse to enter the same boundary from the eastern approach. I watched the handler try everything I had tried. I watched the dog back up the same way Priest had. I've consulted with 2 animal behaviorists since. Both gave me the standard responses: possible subsonic frequencies from geological activity, residual chemical compounds in the soil triggering an aversive response, even the possibility of scent from a larger predator embedded in the ground cover. All possible. None of them confirmed. No geological anomaly on record for that area. No predator activity reported. I still work that region. I've been back 4 times since the 3rd incident. Every time I approach that stretch of land, I find myself watching the dog instead of the terrain ahead, looking for that weight shift, that sideways turn. Every time so far, the dog has worked through it without incident, and I felt quietly relieved and slightly foolish. But I keep my log, and the 3 incidents are in it, timestamped, documented exactly as I described them. Whatever they mean or don't mean, they happened. I recorded them the way I was trained to record things, without interpretation, without conclusion. I just haven't found the column to put them in yet. Clean signal. I want to walk through this the way I'd walk through any incident debrief. I'll tell you what we found, what we did, and what the follow-up determined. What I won't be able to tell you is what it means, because 14 months later, I still don't have that part. The subject was a male, 29, experienced backcountry traveler. He was reported overdue by his roommate after missing a Sunday check-in following a 4-day solo trip into a wilderness area in the Northern Rockies. He was carrying a registered personal locator beacon, a current model, well-maintained according to his roommate, and tested within the last 6 months. He knew how to use it. He'd carried one for years. At 0300 Monday morning, the beacon activated. 1 transmission. Clean signal. Strong ping. Coordinates locked within a 12-meter radius. No distress codes. No secondary activation. Just the single clean burst and then silence. NOAA logged it. We got the relay, and we had a team staged and moving by 0500. The coordinates put us in a rocky basin about 11 miles from the trailhead. Accessible, but committing. The kind of terrain where you make good time on the way in and pay for it on the way out. We reached the basin at approximately 0900. The beacon was on a flat-top boulder near the center of the basin, standing upright, activation switch in the armed position, still transmitting weakly on residual power, placed deliberately, not dropped, not fallen, not set down casually, standing upright the way you'd place something you wanted to be found. Beside it, arranged on the same boulder in a loose grouping, were 3 other items. His water filter, a small folding knife, blade closed, a laminated photograph, which told us he'd brought it intentionally, not by accident. In the photograph, there were two people I'd later learn were his parents. He didn't have anything other than those 3 items. No pack, no tent, no sleeping system, no food, and no additional gear. There was no sign of a camp having been made anywhere in the basin, and no sign of the subject. I want to be precise about the photograph, because it's the detail that keeps coming back to me in the way details do when they don't have a clear explanation. Laminated. He had taken the time at some point before this trip to laminate a photograph of his parents and carry it into the backcountry. That tells you the photograph mattered to him. People don't laminate things that don't matter. He left it on that rock. We spent the next 6 hours working the basin in expanding circles. Full team, 2 dogs, everything we had. The dogs worked the area around the boulder and then pushed forward outward in every direction. They found his scent, leading into the basin from the southern approach, which matched his planned route. The scent trail ended approximately 40 feet from the boulder. The scent trail had not faded, not dispersed the way scent disperses over distance or time. The handlers described it as a clean termination, present up to a point and then simply not present. One described it as the olfactory equivalent of a line drawn in the dirt. I've worked with search dogs for 6 years, and I've never had a handler describe a scent trail that way before. We expanded the search over the following 3 days. Additional teams, aerial support. The full resource commitment you make when a subject is still missing and the situation doesn't have an explanation. We covered every drainage, every ridgeline, every piece of terrain within a radius that should have been more than sufficient. We found nothing. The case remains open. He has not been located. There has been no activity on his bank account, no phone usage, no contact with family or friends. His roommate said he'd seemed completely normal before the trip, excited, well prepared, the same as he always was before a backcountry trip. The official position is that he suffered a medical event, or an accident in terrain we were unable to cover, or that he made it out of the wilderness by an unplanned route and had chosen not to be found, which happens occasionally and which I've always found to be the least satisfying explanation. What I think about, and I don't share this in official debriefs, is the arrangement of those items on that boulder. I think about the deliberateness of it, the beacon standing upright, armed and transmitting, placed where it would be found, the photographs beside it, the specific items chosen and the specific items left out. It reads like someone making a decision, not an accident, not a crisis response, not someone activating a beacon because they were injured or lost and needed help. Someone who placed those objects carefully and then, according to everything our search produced, ceased to exist in any way our tools could measure. I've processed a lot of incidents in this work. I have language for most of them. Exposure, trauma, disorientation, equipment failure, decision fatigue. There's a framework, and the framework usually holds. The framework doesn't hold here. I've never replaced it with anything else. I just left that space in my understanding of this incident empty. The way you leave a room in a house that you've decided not to go into anymore. The photograph bothers me most. Not because I can't explain it, because I can't stop thinking about what it meant that he left it there, whether it was a goodbye or something else entirely. Whether wherever he went, he felt like he didn't need it anymore, or whether something decided he didn't. What Nora draws. I need to say something before I start because I've thought a lot about whether to share this at all. Nora is 8 now. She's healthy, she's happy, she goes to school, and she has friends, and she is by every measure that matters, completely fine. I want that on the record before anything else because she's my daughter and she comes first. I won't tell this story in a way that makes her into something other than a little girl. What I'm less certain about is everything that came after. Nora has autism. Nonverbal. She speaks some words. She knows people by name, but she has trouble explaining an experience. It's not available to her the way it is for most people. She processes the world differently, and she always has, but that's not a tragedy. It's just Nora. What it meant during the search and in the months that followed is that we couldn't ask her what happened. We still can't. We've accepted that we probably never will. She was 5 when she went missing. We were 3 days into a camping trip in the Appalachian Mountains, my husband's idea. The kind of trip I'd agreed to because he'd been asking for years and I'd run out of reasons to say no. We had a good campsite, and the kids were happy. Nora had been calm the whole trip, which for her is a real thing, not a given. Sometimes new environments overwhelm her sensory system, and we spend the whole time managing that. This trip, she'd been content, exploring the edges of the campsite, collecting things, and doing what she does. She was there at 8 p.m. when we put her and her brother to bed in the tent. At 8:22, I know because I checked my phone right around then. I looked over, and she wasn't where she'd been sitting. I want to skip over the next part because it's not part of this story I'm here to tell, and because I've replayed it enough times in my own head. What I'll say is that the next 47 hours were the worst of my life, that the search team was extraordinary, and that they found her on the morning of the 3rd day, approximately 4 miles from our campsite. She was sitting at the base of a large hemlock tree, calm, unhurt, and apparently unbothered. Her clothes were dirty, but intact. No scratches beyond what you'd expect from moving through underbrush. No signs of dehydration or exposure despite 2 nights in terrain that got into the low 40s after dark. She was holding a smooth stone in each hand, which is a self-regulation thing she does when she needs something familiar to hold on to. The lead search and rescue coordinator, a woman named Barb, who I still think about with more gratitude than I know how to express, said in her 22 years of search work, she had never recovered a non-speaking 5-year-old 4 miles into backcountry terrain in that condition. She said it with professional neutrality, but I could tell it meant something to her. I chose not to ask what. Nora didn't react to being found the way you might expect. No crying, no running to us, no visible relief. She looked at Barb and then at the other volunteers, and then at me with the same expression she always has. She let me pick her up and hold her. After a moment, she put her arms around my neck, the way she does when she's allowing comfort, rather than seeking it. We held each other for a long time in that forest, and I cried enough for both of us. We took her home 2 days later. She ate well, she slept well, she went back to her routines without disruption. The developmental team who works with her saw no behavioral changes outside her baseline. By every clinical measure, Nora was fine. About 3 weeks after we got home, I noticed the drawings. Nora has always drawn. It's one of her primary ways of engaging with the world. She draws things she sees, things she remembers, things she's currently processing. Her drawings are recognizable, but imprecise in the way 5-year-old drawings are. Misproportioned heads, simplified bodies, trees that look like lollipops, exactly what you'd expect for someone her age. She started drawing the same thing repeatedly. Not every day, maybe every few days mixed in with her other drawings. Horses, and her brother, and our dog, and the treehouse. But regularly, consistently, the same image each time. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a bear. It was drawn in black crayon, standing upright, at the edge of what clearly was a tree line. She draws trees the same way every time, easy to recognize. The figure was large relative to the trees, which she sometimes draws that way when something feels significant to her. It had upright posture, which bears do, and a rounded head. The image was very dark. I set it aside. She draws animals constantly. Bears are in every nature book she owns. The second drawing was 2 days later. Same composition. This time, she'd drawn it larger and spent way more time on it. I could tell from the density of the crayon strokes. Still upright, still dark. The proportions were different from a bear though. I noticed that this time, the torso looked too long, the limbs too thin. The way she'd drawn the arms hanging too far down the body relative to where they should sit. I told myself 5-year-olds draw animals with wrong proportions all the time. I set it aside. The third drawing she brought to me directly, which she doesn't always do. She stood beside me until I looked at it as she watched my face. It was the same figure, same tree line, but this time she had added something else, a small shape in the lower right corner of the page. I recognized after a moment that it was her, Nora, the way she always draws herself, a circle head with 2 lines for ponytails. She was small in the drawing. The figure at the tree line was very large. I asked her, calmly and carefully, if it was a bear. She didn't answer me, which is not unusual. I asked if that was something she saw in the woods. She looked at the drawing for a moment, and then looked at me, and then went back to her table. My husband thought I was making something out of nothing. He's not wrong that I was primed to find meaning after what we'd been through. Trauma does that. It makes you reach for patterns. He's a rational person, and his rational read was that she'd seen a bear on the trip, or she had seen pictures of bears in the books we looked at to prepare for the trip, and she was just drawing it in the way kids process experiences. He said the proportions were because she's 5 and she draws everything with wrong proportions. He said the size difference between her figure and the bear was because kids draw important things bigger. All of that is true. I stopped asking her about it after the 4th or 5th drawing, not because I stopped noticing, but because of what I mentioned at the beginning, the way she is when she draws it. With the horses, she's animated, moving her crayon fast, picking up different colors. With her brother, she sometimes narrates in her limited way, making small sounds. With this figure, she's quiet, settled. The way she gets sometimes in the early morning before the house wakes up, sitting in the window seat looking out at the backyard. Not afraid, not distressed, content almost. That's the part I don't know what to do with. I know what fear looks like in Nora. I've seen it, managed it, sat with her through it more times than I can count. This isn't that. She drew it again last week, came and put it on the kitchen counter while I was making dinner, the way she leaves things she wants me to see. I looked at it for a long time after she went to bed. Same tree line, same figure, same Nora in the corner, small. This time she'd drawn a hand. The figure's hand reaching, not toward her, just open, extended, the way you'd hold out a hand to show you weren't holding anything. The proportions were still wrong. The arm was still too long. It still could have been a bear. I put it in the folder with the others. I've kept all of them. I don't know what she saw in those woods. I don't know what kept her safe and calm for 2 nights in terrain that should have been terrifying for a 5-year-old who struggles with unfamiliar environments. What I know is that she's never once drawn it looking threatening. Whatever it is in her memory, whatever she's putting on paper every few days, it isn't something that scared her. I've decided to let that be enough. Most days, it is. That's all for tonight. If any of these stayed with you, that's probably the right response. New stories coming soon. Turn the lights off. And thanks for watching. Good night. Before I go, if you're watching this the day it came out, thank you for being here at the very beginning. And if you're watching this years from now, after however many stories we've told together, I hope you went back and started from the start. This is where it all began. Either way, thank you. Genuinely.